Welcome to Patent Insider Secrets, the podcast where we bring you the top minds of intellectual property and share the insider knowledge that every founder, inventor, and creative professional needs to make their ideas truly work for them. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a guest who has dedicated her career to making IP strategy accessible and invaluable for startups and early stage companies. Joining us today is the Jackie Hutter, the Chief IP Strategist and founder of the Hutter Group. Thank you, Jackie, for being here. So I want to go through a little bit of your background and then, get your story. I always like to say that you are my go-to person when it comes to intellectual property strategy. I mean, when we look at your LinkedIn, your resume, you are a global leader in IP strategy, and you have a very unique approach that focuses on you're not just like the regular, I guess, run-of-the-mill patent or intellectual property thinker. You actually think outside the box, and you focus on aligning patent spending directly with the business goals of clients. It's not just to get a patent, check the boxes, but you're more so looking at how does this serve the business needs of the client. And you focus on doing that for small businesses, companies that are doing innovative technologies, game-changing things and changing business. You do that here in Atlanta. You really help to power the ecosystem here in the city. And it's not a traditional approach. You have a lean, business-focused approach that empowers companies. You help companies leverage their IP for actual value, money, and success. And so I want to give you in today's conversation, just get into your story and the stories of your clients. How are you able to be so effective and transformative in a space where, everyone's in a creator economy, everyone's innovating, everybody's trying to develop the next software, the next thing that's going to business forward. How did you get into this?
Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be here to help share my approach with the broader audience. The answer is I'm surprised to realize that I had been making a lot of money for myself as a traditional lawyer in law firm contexts for many years. But when I went inside a corporation and actually saw how business is done and how money is made, I realized that when I was a law firm lawyer, both from a litigation as well as a patent prosecution side of things, I saw that very little of what I did when I was in a law firm made any money for the business at all. And that actually, I went to work for a major corporation in consumer products, and I realized that very little of what was done at the corporation had anything to do with patents at all. And what I needed to do, bringing in quite frankly, a very high skill set. I came to the corporation with a very high skill set. I did not need a very high skill set to be effective as a patent attorney at the corporation. I needed a new skill set in order to be effective in helping my business make more money from their patents. And let me unpack that a little bit. Is 100% of patents make money for 100% of patent attorneys, and a law firm is a business. And your lawyer is always going to be on the other side of the table from you. They're going to have their own interests in heart, even if they can't admit it. From the business, a business is out there to make money and make money in accordance with a particular strategy. And I was fortunate that I had clients when I was coming up as a lawyer that actually gave me visibility to their business strategy. And they were innovation companies, they were innovation-focused companies, and I came from an innovation background from R&D. So I had a sense of how technology was developed, not products, but technology, because technology has to come before you have products. I knew how that ecosystem worked, but most patent attorneys don't have visibility to what goes on in all of those months or years before the client comes to you and says, I need a patent. And very many of those things that happen before the client gets to your doorstep as a when you're a patent attorney, are very relevant to developing the protection that they need. And I saw this when I was at the corporation, the Consumer Products Corporation, because when I was inside the corporation, I saw all the decisions that were made for good reason, bad reason, or no reason during the technology development process. And they would bring to me as their advisor, they would bring to me a product that they were going to sell, which in its fully baked form, which when I was a lawyer, I would say, okay, I'm going to patent this for you. And I'm going to get you broad claims to what this thing is that you brought to me, because that's all I had visibility to. But when I was inside the corporation, going to all the meetings that happened for months or years before the actual product was baked out, I had an understanding of how we ended up with that product based upon who our suppliers were, who our manufacturing, who we had to manufacture, what our price point was, whatever all these other decisions that were made, that really not that they weren't necessarily decisions that other companies would make, right? In order to come up with the same product or a similar product. And this is really important if you think about it, because what I also saw when I was inside a corporation was all the work that it took to develop a technology, to validate it with the customer and get it in front of the customer, and to say, okay, we think that we can make money at scale in a way that will make it possible to get paid back for all of the work that we did and then some. But once we did all the work to develop that and get it in front of the customer, the market was made, the market was developed. And then it became just a game of legally copying you in order to get those same customers, right? Because you no longer had to develop the customers. You no longer had to develop the market. If once the innovator is there, the customer doesn't have to be convinced to buy that product anymore. And if your IP doesn't protect the market, you've given your customers a roadmap to copy you. And they don't have to make the same decisions that you did to be the first innovator in the market. And so what I realized from that framework, and I'll go back to my law firm in a second to give a more succinct explanation of this. What I realized is that it didn't, what the business team brought to me, the technical team brought to me, was not what I needed to patent in order to make sure we got paid back for all the work. I needed to revisit all of the steps that we made as a company for good reason, bad reason, or no reason, to make sure that I was able to get patent claims, and actual patent specification of the disclosure that was broad enough to encompass every reasonable way to make not the product, but to provide the same solution for the customer. Because the customer doesn't buy a product, they buy a solved problem, right? And so I learned that I had to the product doesn't matter. The customer matters. And the customer always matters when you're trying to create a large set of value.
That's like excellent business wisdom, but for a practitioner and as a technical patent agent, patent attorney, we're taught that the name of the game is the claim, the product is what matters, and you want to cover the meats and bounds of that. It's just a shift in thinking. How do you cover something like that? How do you cover the commercialization, the market development, all these other things that aren't the hard product that I'm selling to somebody?
Actually, it's funny. When I do my onboarding with my clients, and I only take clients that are creating big change in the marketplace. They're solving problems at scale that have been intractable for years, right? So arguably that's a definition of innovation, right? There's an unmet need in the marketplace, and you have a product that you can sell at scale. That's a new market. But I've gotten very good at onboarding folks to say, I don't care about your technology. Okay. I don't care about your product. Okay. We'll talk about that later, or it may become self-evident as we go forward. And I very often keep technical people out of the room where I'm bringing people on and talking about this, because the customer matters. What customer problem is being solved at scale, right? And that it's basically a business development question. I have the most success when I'm in the room with people who are the business development folks who are going out and talking to the customers. And so the funny thing is, and I've been working with a computer vision company for years, we've built a beautiful portfolio. But when we first started working together, he's a PhD. I didn't understand what he was doing. Now I do, because I've been working with him for so long. But I said to him, and I'm just going to call him John, give me 2 pages of math. I can't read it, make sure it's right. and I would stick 2 pages of math, literally 2 pages of math in the first few applications we did. But we weren't claiming the math. We weren't claiming the algorithm. We weren't claiming the software. We were claiming the value that was the natural consequence of this stuff that they were doing. And that's the hard part. The technology is the hard part. But the customer didn't care about that. They wanted the ability to do something that they weren't able to do before. And that's what we were owning. And that was we would consistently own. And we've got a broad portfolio it's infringed. We know it's infringed by people all over, not just in our market, but adjacent markets, because we are claiming, because our claims are so broad as to cover things, the enabling technology
Right.
that we're doing. But you have to, for me, when I'm starting this process, I'm going out there and I'm looking to see what the problems are, why they haven't been solved. And prior art is relevant to me. The other patents are relevant to me, not because of what they claim, because I know that we're fine because the problem hasn't been solved, right? There's no claims that cover the solution that I'm doing because the problem still exists.
Right.
Um, uh, but the patent literature gives to me a knowledge of what people have done in the past that I can then say in my patent application, this didn't work. That's why the problem's still there. And this is why we're solving the problem. And my claims are geared always toward the customer, not toward the technology.
So let's back up a second. If I'm an early stage CEO, let's say I've discovered something, PhD at tech or something like that, and have a business partner, and we're going to start a company. We think we have some traction. We've done the research, we the market. As an early stage CEO, how important is IP strategy? What should I be doing? What should I be thinking about?
Yeah. So I tell folks you don't patent for the business you have or you want, you patent for the exit you want or need. Okay. So the first thing you got the first thing, traction is important. I've sent so many people away because they haven't shown me how they're going to get a customer and how they're going to scale that customer. Right. And so that puts me in a different class of most people out there. I will send you away. When you're willing to throw money at me, I'll say, no, I don't want your money because I don't think that I can create value for you. And now, mind you, many of my clients are very early stage. They don't have any customers, but they have to at least be able to show me the output of their lean canvas, where they show me that what they're doing now has a really strong possibility of leading to customer validation, which means that they've gotten in front of the customers, which we should talk about too, about getting in front of the customers. You want to talk about that later. I think if you're in stealth mode, I won't take you either, because I don't think there's any value in patenting something that hasn't met the customer. But going back, with the IP strategy should be what you're thinking about first and foremost, okay, at any stage, because IP strategy is a process, not an event. So it should be baked into your business ecosystem from the earliest stage. So what should you be thinking about? First, you have to figure out whether the environment in which you're going to be developing technology cares about patents. Okay. If they don't care about patents, then why get patents? Okay. But importantly, not getting a patent is a patent strategy. Okay. So that is somebody we meet an investors, they say, why don't you have any patents? We did an analysis and we determined that there's not the environment in which we're building our business doesn't care about patents. Okay. That's actually fairly rare when you're thinking about the incumbent companies that you want to exit into, or you want to be strategic companies, you want to develop strategic partnerships with. And this is super critical for folks to realize. And it was, quite frankly, an insight that I had years after I've been practicing for more years than I want to admit, because actually I came from the inside, right? I came from the big corporate side of things. And the only thing you know is what everybody tells you and what you experience, you don't really know how everything else works, right? That's just the nature of experience. But I was one of those lawyers at the law firm and then later at the corporation who got paid the big bucks to do things, right? I did patents and I did litigation. And if there wasn't those things to do, I wasn't needed, right? So I wouldn't get paid and I wouldn't have a job. And that's the nature of what is missed with respect to how patents drive business value for startups and early stage companies. And what I mean there is I would never advocate. I should better say, I have a very strong, almost convertible bias against not, if you're a startup or early stage company, think about litigation. You're in the wrong business model. Your business model is not to pay lawyers. Your business model is to get revenue to pay your stakeholders back, and your stakeholders aren't lawyers, right? So we're not going to sue unless we can get somebody else to pay for it, which is a really hard thing to do. I went through that process last year. Your patents are not to protect your product, right? Because protection means you're going to sue somebody or you're going to threaten to sue somebody. Rather, as I said, you patent for the exit you want or need. And so who are those folks? What does that mean? If you're hypothetically going to exit into a company wants to buy your technology, probably not your customers, because your customers, the incumbents are going to have lots more customers than you're going to have. They're going to buy your technology. They're going to buy your validated customer that they can scale. But also what they're going to do is what they're going to be looking at, how does the patents that you have got as a startup or early stage company, how do they give me competitive advantage in the marketplace? So these companies, name a company, I don't know, just some big company that sues all the time. AT&T, let's just say AT&T. I got some friends over at AT&T. So if AT&T was going to buy a portfolio of a startup company that had technology that they thought was promising, they saw that there was a broadly scalable market, because it's got to be massive for an AT&T to come in, right? The broadly scalable market. And so how would that market be sustainable then? That market would be sustainable if there had broad patent protection that covered the full suite of the opportunity that was available to the AT&T. What does AT&T do? They have armies of lawyers who sue other companies, right? For a startup or early stage company, having a strong patent portfolio that covers the full market solution that the technology enables will make it so that a company like AT&T acquires not just the company, they acquire the patents that give them competitive advantage against their competitors, right? That's the exit you want.
So yeah, you just said something I think that's so critical for early stage companies. A lot of times people are looking at patents as a pot of gold or a get rich quick. If I get a patent, then no one can take my thing and I'm going to get rich. But I think how you just described it, if you really are solving a problem that matters in the market and you're early stage company, you're not going to be the one to build the entire technology footprint, but you're making
It's rare to do that. It
yeah.
actually is rare to do that. Yeah.
So you're looking at who can I sell to do that, and what makes it attractive to them. That's why I think that's just a very different way as an early stage company. Because this goes back to something I read. I know you talk about aligning the IP strategy with the business goals and objectives. I guess my question would be, for early stage company, a lot of times they don't know the business objective. They don't know, they want to make money. They want to be successful. They want to get to the next valuation. They want to get the next accelerator, the next funding round. They're not looking at being built to exit or being built to be acquired by a Fortune 100 company, something like that's going to take them and take their technology into the future. So it actually solves the problem and scales how it's supposed to scale. So how do you communicate that to an early stage company? What are some things that they can do to think about that from the beginning?
So first, this is an insight that I had more years being out of law school than I want to admit these days, but let's get nomenclature. Let's get aligned on nomenclature.
Okay.
What I realized after working with startups and then early stage companies, and this is where the nomenclature comes in for many years, is that we need to differentiate where somebody is in the time scale of an early company. A startup is a company that doesn't have customers, or if they have customers, they're really shaky. They're just trying to out there. Maybe they're giving their stuff away just so they can get a foot in the door. Versus an early stage company, which is a company that has customers, right? And they're generating revenue. And very often the startup companies will pivot so many times that because they have to follow the customer. If you do this the right way, if you follow the lean model, your technology doesn't matter, the customer matters. Your technology will change. Whereas an early stage company has, as you said, traction, right? So you have to, and I will take startup companies, right? But only under certain criteria. That's what it's on the startup side of things. People tend to get patents too early. Okay. And and I like to call it the traditional practice, I call them the patent industrial complex for a reason, right? Because it doesn't exist unless it can feed itself, right? And startups feed that model by getting patents. Okay, not getting a patent gets a patent attorney, no second house. Okay, that was me. I'm making a joke about my former self, by the way, not my colleagues, but I would do this to my colleagues, and some of them get offended, but that's fine. So somebody comes to me and they think they have a good technology idea. If you go to a traditional patent attorney, they'll say, "Oh, let me patent it for you," right? As I've seen countless numbers of times with my clients over the years, patenting too early is it's probably worse than patenting the wrong thing. Why is that? Because you should be spending money on your technology development. You should be spending money on your customer development. You don't need to be spending money on me that early. And Steve Blank, the lean startup guy, says no ideas survives its first introduction to the customer, right? Your customer is going to totally change your ideas about everything. And if you don't follow the customer, it's a hobby, right? It's not a business. So it's super important to get out in front of the customer, which your traditional patent attorney will tell you, "Oh no, that's scary. All these parade of horribles will happen if you do this," right? Yeah, and pay me $20,000 to get you a patent application so you can go out and talk to the customer. What if what you tried to patent is wrong, right? You've just wasted $20,000, right?
Right.
So what I counsel folks in is to go out and talk to the customer about their needs, about if you're a startup, about their needs, what solutions they might need to solve those. And you don't tell them about the technology. You're not disclosing anything by getting in front of the customer. So part of that original question, if I can recall it, is that, make sure that you're focusing in parallel on technology and customer development. And you can keep your technology in stealth mode, and you should keep your technology in stealth mode because your customer doesn't care about the technology, but you make sure you're asking the right questions to the potential customers. And what that does is not just make sure that you have a better understanding of whether or not you have a business model. You might have a business model that has legs, as it were. But what also happens, always happens, and it's amazing how consistent this is. When you get in front of a customer and they say, "No, I don't really need that, but have you thought about this?" That gives you this understanding of what other needs there might be out there in the marketplace that you can also bake into your patent application. I have had so many times where I've had clients that we thought, and there's actually one client in particular, I have to be careful here, that we thought that from our customer discovery that we were going to be brought big bags of money for a particular new technology, which is now ubiquitous, by the way. It was really hard to do when we did it. It's not hard now. That's why everybody's infringing us. And that there was a particular business model, looked really promising, lots of total market, addressable market, whatever factors you want to use, were huge, right? Huge. So we started moving in that direction. Our technology will do this. But in the meantime, we had been out there talking to the customers, and some people said, "No, I don't need this, but have you thought about this?" Because you talk to people who are out there in the market, they're going to have visibility to a lot more things than you are, right? Because they're there and they sell products and they make products. And so in the patent application that we developed at the time, again, we were a startup company. They had nothing except like a CEO and a CTO, PhD, who were in a conference room at Georgia Tech. Seriously, that was it. And me, once a month, I would come and talk to them. And when we were writing this patent application, it turned out to be a patent application that we're still filing patent claims from 8 years later. We put stuff in the patent application that the customer told us. We got a patent on the business model we thought that was going to be our go-to-market business model, but it turns out we were way too early, right? That market now is only just developing. It's a particular construction market. So we had to pivot, right? In order to be successful, we had to pivot. But because we had put all of the adjacent market opportunities in our patent application, the market that we pivoted into, we also got patent claims in that market because we had gone out there and gotten all this information in there. So I think that what I like to counsel startups when they're doing this, think about is What if you're wrong on the customer? What other solutions could the technology you're developing enable, right? And the other thing I like to say, it's just so cool and nobody thinks about this, and I wish everybody thought about this because it's so important. Startups, and we can go to early stage in a second with based upon the nomenclature, but startups are out there working 24/7 on doing something. They have visibility to things that other folks don't have because they're not working on the same problems. Very often, you can see the future when you're doing that, right? You've got this thing in front of you. That's this product that your customer has said, yeah, I think that's cool. But what's going to happen in an innovation context is there are going to be what I like to call second or third or fourth order effects of what you're doing. When the customer has this new thing that solves their problem in front of them for the first time, how is the behavior going to change? What are they now able to do that they weren't able to do before? What is the natural consequence that's going to happen when the customer now has this whole new world open for them? We also want to think about those things and put those in the patent application. And I think I can talk about this publicly because I won't be generic, but I was doing some work with a drone company, and they were doing some really cool things with drones when drones were only commercially being introduced years ago. And I said to the client, the team, I was always with the team, how will the world change if we're right? If we make the right technology bets and not even the right business bets, because maybe you're wrong on business, but if you have broad solutions covered, you might be able to monetize those in the future. But let's say to hear it was both. And I said, how will the world change? And so the one of the people on the team said, oh, Jackie, you'll be able to do such and such on a drone. And I went, that's crazy. You can't do that. That's drone can't do that. And then I thought for a second, I went, oh, Moore's law, everything's possible. And so I put literally like a paragraph and a half on something that was a future state that wasn't possible at the time, but yeah, it was perfectly logical the way technology would roll out. But by the way, I forgot about all this. And a couple of years ago, the CEO came back to me and he says, Jackie, there's a company that has a $4 billion valuation, and this is what we're doing. This is what they're doing, I should say. I need claims to that on a patent application we filed years ago, right? And I said, oh, Sam, we had no idea that this was the case. He goes, Jackie, I need you to get this for me. Go back and look at the application, see if you can get this for me. And sure enough, tapped away at almost the very end of a 70-page patent application, because all my stuff is long like that because you're not just patenting for the present, you're patenting for the future. There was a paragraph and a half that said exactly what this company's business model was. And so I was able to get patent claims to an embodiment, to a product that did not exist, could not exist, but it was the natural consequence of what would happen. And so now my client has claims to the predominant business model in one of the markets in which our technology is being used, right? And the only way we could do that was because we're working on the problem 24/7.
So I have a couple of questions for the founder that may not be as patent fluent in this. So the same that's my company. Say that we did this, 8 years ago. We have claims. We're getting claims to something that's actually now currently on the market. And what do I do with that? How do I monetize? What does that make possible for me as a company? Why is that important?
So nobody's going to bring you a big bag of money unless you created a business. Okay. And the old adage goes, build a better, the old saw is build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. And people use that to justify just getting a patent, right? No, it's build a better mousetrap. Okay. You have to actually build something. It's very rare that a naked patent portfolio, that is a patent portfolio that doesn't cover anything that you've made, is going to have any value at all. Of course, there's exceptions to that, but it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. But it's an interesting story that people like to tell. And so people think that's a common outcome, but it's not, right? People love to tell stories, and that's a good story. I've sold my patent portfolio for $10 million. Now everybody wants to go do the same thing and not just realizing that was a fluke. That was a lucky break. right? It was just pure random chance in most part. But I've sold a portfolio, pure random chance. And so we talk about, I've built the company and I've got a patent portfolio on that. I'm building a patent portfolio and it's got robust claims. You've worked with somebody like me, or just, and what do I do with that? I've got a business. I'm building a business. Having patent protection, just meaningful things, meaningful patent protection can very often get you a seat at the table with a strategic partner who wouldn't otherwise give you the time of day, right? It's just getting old now. A lot of people may not remember this, but BASF had the most amazing trademark, service mark for years. We don't make the stuff you buy. We make the stuff you buy you better. That's what my clients are doing. They're making stuff that people buy. They're solutions, an incumbent software company that has an enterprise software solution. They can't meet all of their customers' needs and expectations because there's a technology gap in the product they have. My folks solve those problems, right? That they enabling technology that allows these. So the incumbent companies will come to my client to get help to serve their own customers. And if I have protection to that, if I have strategic protection to that, then they very often come to me for licensing that. And then I get embedded into their systems and they can't move forward. If they want to continue in that direction, they can't move forward without getting some kind of durable, long-standing license to my technology, which means they'll have to buy me, right? Or give me a royalty stream, right? With regard to the royalty stream, this is an interesting story, and they won't mind. I'll be careful here, but they won't mind me getting a little bit close. So I had a client years ago, I'm still working with them, that two guys from Georgia Tech, one was a PhD in computer vision. Another one had his MBA in innovation from Georgia Tech. The great thing about Georgia Tech innovation is they actually teach you how to find customers and develop businesses, right? So these two guys met while they were at school, and they came upon an unusual business model only because one of them had a relative that had a medical indication that happens to older people, and it was really debilitating. So you had these two young guys working on an old people disease, right? Usually tech dude bros don't work on stuff that it's just, they were outsiders in that regard. So these two young guys said, hey, they found it was business in school. They determined it was a viable business model. And so they came up with an imaging methodology that would greatly make it a lot easier to determine whether somebody was going to be symptomatic of this really debilitating problem. And the thing with this medical issue is that if you caught it before it actually happened, you wouldn't have any problems, right? You would be able to treat it and stay healthy. But if it happened, it was a cascade. And it was really, and I learned this over the course of years, but I can relate to this now as a story perspective. It was not a sexy disease, right? It was just one of those things that happened to older people, and it ruined effectively ruined their lives, right? But it also affected everybody else. It affected, they couldn't be fully present for their families. They couldn't potentially be caregivers, or couldn't be out couldn't work anymore. They just couldn't be full human beings once this debilitating disease happened. So and it cost a ton of money and primarily Medicare to treat this disease. So there's all kinds of these horrible things that happen once you got this, but nobody was ever they were all focused on the treatment. Once it happened, nobody was focusing on the prevention, right? And it was just the nature of the medical system a lot of times. So because one of these founders had a relative that had this problem, they started working in that direction. It's like prevention. We're going to do prevention, and we're going to make it we want to develop technology, make it easy, really easy to see whether somebody's going to be symptomatic, and then you can prevent it. Well, it turned out, so they saw me very early. We're literally bleeding edge in this, and started to get some traction on the technology validation. And also were doing clinical work. They were actually out there in the field and seeing how bad it was for people who had this affliction. So it made them even more motivated. And it turns out that they had not even been out there for a year live before an incumbent company that sold products to treat the illness or to actually treat and prevent. They saw this incumbent company who'd been around for 50 years, no innovation at all. They found them. They said, hey, we can hire you to do the measurements we need for the device that's used to treat these people, right? Both in the prevention side of things and also when you have it. Because their technology did not just observe whether or get the signals from the person, whether or not they might be symptomatic of this illness, a debilitating illness. Those observations that they got were also applicable to the medical device that was used, right?
Oh, wow.
So they got a licensing agreement with this incumbent company that basically paid for all their development. They didn't have to take, if they had to take outside investment, it was very little. It was non-dilutive capital, right? And it took them a different direction. When they started, when this company came to them and said, hey, we don't want to hire you to do what you thought were going to do. We want to hire you to do something else. They went that direction and continued developing that technology to make it even more desirable in that particular market space, and got a long-term development deal with this company. And that's paid the bill for years. It's paid for me for years. We've gotten 5 or 6 patent applications allowed, or maybe even more. I can't even keep count anymore. But now, and this is very interesting, we've basically just been managing the existing portfolio for the last couple of years, but they've come to me in the last couple of months and said, hey, Jackie, we're going in a different direction. We want to go back to the prevention side of things, and we're going to do it in an entirely different way. And because they have credibility in the marketplace, they've got a huge government development grant. And now they're going in a different direction to create a prevention innovation here. That was a long way of saying sometimes sometimes the folks will see something in you that you didn't see in yourself. And you have the patents that allow them to get the exclusive rights to keep their competitors out, which is exactly what happened here. There were 3 competitors in the marketplace. One has gotten the technology to automate something that's always been done a different way and actually very ineffectively. And that's paid dividends for the last 6 or 7 years for these guys. And they're still going back and able to do what they started out with originally. The other thing that you can do is you monetize your company if you have patents. You make your company more monetizable with patents. I have to tell you, I've been disappointed twice in the last year with that question. Is your company worth more if you have patents? And the answer is maybe. Okay. And I'll tell this story because I think this is a heartbreak for me. It literally was a heartbreak. A client came to me, had a company that does some kind of construction space, does a treatment that in construction. Successful. He makes machines that does this, that allow this construction process to happen. Nice business. Probably turning over $20 million a year. But the guy who started the company actually used to be one of the people who did the construction process. So he knew what the gaps were in the process. And one of the gaps was safety. And so he had this idea to make this process that's not particularly safe, where he actually was injured. That's why he started the company. He came up with this process to make this process much safer. And at the end of the day, all of my innovators are outsiders in some way. They're looking at the problem differently, which is why the problems always remain unsolved, because you've got the same people solving the same problems, right? They've been studying the same thing for 20 years. How are they going to change, right? They're not innovative. But you've got these outsiders who come in and say, I think I have a better way to do this. And this was this guy. And he's from a rural area, didn't go to college, but quite honestly, one of the smartest people I've ever met. A younger guy and is under 40. And he should have a PhD from Georgia Tech. I tell him this all the time. He's so scientifically intuitive. And the stuff that he's doing, he brought me this innovation. I said to him, Tom, I usually see this stuff with 2 pages of math. literally 2 pages. So it's chemical engineering. That was a background. I usually see 2 pages of math when you come to this kind of process. And I said, you just came up with it, right? You just came up with it by seeing a different way to look at it. So he went to a patent attorney years ago, and the patent, I'm not going to go into this, but the patent attorney just didn't care, didn't understand, and just phoned something in. And he was referred to me for this safer process by somebody he knew that I had done a lot of work for, who also had been burned by the patent system. He says, you need to go talk to Jackie. And literally, he got me 2 months before his patent was going to issue. So we were able to fix a lot of that stuff. But also, I recognized that there was a lot of stuff left on the table for this innovation. And we developed this really lengthy patent application with all the things you could do, all the processes, all the second and third order effects I talked about recently. And this guy is, again, like I said, turning $20 million over a business on his core business. And he's trying to develop this technology that you'd think that people would be clamoring for because it's safer. Literally, you're not hurt. Everybody else is hurt or could be hurt. And this process is cheaper, better, faster, safer, all this stuff associated with it. And we ended up getting broad patent protection for both the first patent that I was able to fix and the broader set that I wrote for him. And he got an IP valuation for that innovation. And I have a friend who's an IP valuation who did the work for him. And the patents were not valued very high. And in that number valuation. And that was part and parcel to what we also saw is that the incumbents in the market who are using the old process, which is not safe, not great, all kinds of stuff associated with it that make it the least best option out there. But that's what the market does. That's what the market uses. That's what they're used to. And they're not innovative. At the end of the day, he's an innovator in a market that doesn't value innovation. And he came to me, I call him Tom. We talked a couple of weeks ago. We hadn't talked for a while. And he said, Jackie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that it didn't work out on the patents. And I said, Tom, well, hold on to the patents if you can, because they're going to be worth something someday, because that's the way things are naturally going to go through regulation in California, for example. But I said, Tom, I can get you awesome patents that cover everything you need to have covered, but I can't make people fall in love with your innovation in a way that makes them want to have that innovation that's covered by broad patents, right? And at the end of the day, that's what it is. Your patents are only going to be, your lousy patents never going to be worth anything, right? But even somebody who gets really beautiful patent protection, and I call it beautiful because it really is, sometimes it's work of art when I'm doing this with my clients in the metaphorical sense. But unless somebody else values that art, it's worthless, right? It's just for you.
So I think one of the things that's so important for innovators to understand is that you're still in the marketplace, and even having IP or patents in the marketplace. What you said reminded me of, like, when you do government contracting, they say we want the lowest price technically acceptable. So we don't want the best. We want what's marketable, what can fit our budget and is technically acceptable. And I think that sometimes in some markets, that's what drives the market, even if you have a stellar innovation. And so I think as we wrap things up, you did have something that you noted that you wanted me to ask you about, which was working at a company like, I guess in your past, Procter & Gamble, how they had a strategy that they always create patents that protect their billion-dollar new markets, and how startups would do that. I think we were talking about that.
Yeah.
But can you tell me a little bit more about that experience and how they helped shape how you view how to use patents to protect your future?
I came from consumer products. Like a lot of my stuff was consumer products. I was a bench chemist at a consumer products company too. So this really resonated with me when I learned about this years ago. The best company to follow for patent strategy is Procter & Gamble. And how does a consumer product that you buy in the grocery store relate to some advanced technology that you can't even understand it? there's really no difference because strategy is strategy. You just have to figure out how to apply the method and the models to ostensibly unrelated fields. But let's go back to, I love the Procter & Gamble example because everybody can see it. They go into the store and Procter & Gamble is always a 30%, at least 30% premium over some less effective product out there. So I'd love to tell the story of the Swiffer wet jet. And I actually taught about this for a number of years. You have to take the Wayback Machine. Okay, so let me go back. So for Procter & Gamble does not enter, and it may have changed a little bit, but this is the starting point. They do not start a new product development unless it's $1 billion market, unless they can establish from the front end that is $1 billion market. How does $1 billion market exist? You have to make $1 billion market. It doesn't just exist. It's a new product for a new market. And to go back what I said before, you have to make it so that nobody can have a competing product that solves the same problem. So what Procter & Gamble does is they develop their patent portfolio in a way that there's no way for anybody to get in and provide a product that can make the same solution effectively. Because again, they sue everybody. So they will protect their stuff and they have a business model protecting their stuff. So I love to tell this story because I'm old enough to remember the status quo, circa 1996, when rest before Swiffer entered the market. How did you mop your floors? Okay, Swiffer wet jet, bucket. Yep. And I'm from Miami, so you had the Cuban mop, which is a rag on the end of a stick. That's just the Cuban mop is the best mop, as I always say. But so you had the Navy mop. My dad was in the Navy, he always called it Navy mop, or you had the sponge mop, right? And if you think about what happens when you mop, you have the clean water and you take the mop, and you put it across the floor and then put it back in the bucket. What happens?
You have dirty water.
You have dirty water. And you're a mom. I have to do the mom thing because that's who they were talking to in 1996. And you have your mom and your baby's crawling across the floor. What are you doing? You're mopping your floor with dirty water that your baby's crawling across, right? Emotion, right? You go to the emotion. So how do you fix that, right? You don't just come up with a mop that has new solution, right? That you don't have to, you come up with a mop that makes it so that you know that you're not mopping with dirty water, right? So if next time you pick up a Swiffer wet jet, you can look at all this stuff. So they have a mop that, and their claims are amazing. I'm sorry, going geek, but I don't even remember. They have claims, Tariq, that say exactly how much pressure you can put on the pad so that the water doesn't come back out. Which is exactly what the mom wants. She wants there to always be fresh water coming, fresh mop solution coming out, and then it gets mopped up when you put the pad on it, and it doesn't come back out, right? Their patent claims are specifically designed to cover that parameter there. What else do they cover? They have a separate set of patents that say that when you look, that the mop pad is transparent. What does the transparent mop tell you? If it's dirty, right?
Right.
If there's the dirt underneath, right? So you change the pad, okay? You change the pad, which is good for Procter & Gamble, right? They have protection to that. They also have protection to the jar, the bottle that sits there. Now,
Right.
are there hacks on YouTube to how to refill that? Yeah, but they've made it so that the bottle is really hard to refill. So most people aren't going to go refill it. And they've got all these parameters on this that cover the full suite of value that the customer has told them what they want, right? The customer has told them why the customer will pay 30% or maybe even a 50% premium, or maybe 100% premium for the Swiffer wet jet. They don't give that stuff away. But also what Procter & Gamble did and does is, would you believe they actually got protection to the scrubby strip on the front? How did they get protection to the scrubby strip? They were the ones who were out in the marketplace, right? They were the ones with the perfect knowledge of the product and the customer, because they kept going back to the customer, and the customer said, "Oh, the product's great, but we think it would be better if you had a scrubby strip on the front." So sure enough, they got another set of patents on the scrubby strip, right? And so they expanded their protection beyond the original time, and they continue to do that. The other thing that I love is to that point is, and this is going back many years now, but I remember I'm frugal, and I was in Aldi, and Aldi had generic Aldi brand Swiffer wet jet pads, right? So I was like, oh, I'm going to buy these because they're half
Mhm.
the price of the Procter and Gamble. Because clearly the patent had run out
Right.
on the original pads. And I took these pads home and they were awful because they were the version of the product that had been rolled out in 1996 that was off patent, which was the crappy version. It was a good version then, but now it was the crappy version. And because I was using the modern product, I was expecting the performance, which was covered by the new pads that they patented later. And so we still don't even see a knockoff product out there because in order to knock off what the customer expects, it would be going back years for some previous product that might have been really good at the time, but it does not meet the consumer's expectations today. And we see that again. I haven't bought it yet. It's probably awesome. That's probably why I don't want to buy it. We've got the Power Mop now that's got all
Yeah.
these things out there, right? They're doing the same thing again. They are setting the standard for a new market that people are not going to buy the knockoff if there is a knockoff. But even when there is a knockoff, it's not going to anywhere meet the performance expectations, right? And so that is how you build a portfolio in a new market. You get as much as you look at the customer and you do a 360 of what the customer's expectations and needs are, not just today, but in the future, whatever you can know then. But again, IP strategy is a process, not an event. You keep going back there and talking to the customer and seeing whether, and not all of those things the customer tells you they need are going to be patentable. But if you don't ask, you're by definition not going to get them. So that means you have to have your patent person, not as somebody you call, say, hey, I got something for you, but you integrate to the extent possible. You integrate that patent person into your ecosystem so that you can do these things in real time together. Now, many of my clients, because we work together for 2 or 3 years, they know when they need to call me, right? Because they know the process and they know I use an expletive, a Jackie O expletive moment, right?
Oh yeah.
When you got OS moment, I need to call Jackie because the customer just went O expletive. That's really cool. Until you get your cadence on that, you build that into your processes. You actually need to, if you were my client, you need to talk to me on a regular basis, right? Because I'm going to be the person to say, hey, what happened? What are you doing? What have you learned? What surprises did you have? And we'll build that into to this ongoing, whether or not it's meaningful for us to talk about filing another set of patents. Hopefully my clients, the best thing is when my clients call me and say, hey, Jackie, this is really cool. We want to talk to you about it. Because they've already known to do that. But you've got to have that learning first before you're going to be able to do that. And if you are building technology that people want to have that solves their problems, you need to have somebody like me in your meetings once every quarter.
So it's not a one-off. I think that's one of the things that companies think because of the old stories and things like that, that a patent is a one-time thing, it's a guarantee, and it will save. But it sounds like more like this is a collaborative process. It's something that you use strategically to build and secure your market while you're building it. But you have to be active in building it. It's not a passive process. You're not just writing your hopes and dreams on a wish list and
Yeah.
now you're going to get rich.
And you have to make sure that the person who you're engaging to help you with this process is not in it for the money, right? Is not in, but I don't mean that in a pejorative way. It's not in it to get you a patent, right? It is in it to help you build your business. And if patents are what you need to build your business, that they're going to be your partner in the process.
Exactly. I have so many other questions that I could talk.
We can do this again. It's
Yeah.
fine. I love to educate. I love to educate.
Because there's so many things that, I'm replaying conversations that I had with founders, and there's conventional wisdom, which is not really so conventional if you really want to be effective at this. And I think that to counteract those narratives is so important to have conversations like these. I want to.
Can I just do one thing on that
Yeah.
point? I think it's a good close. You have to recognize that you come from an untraditional background, right? But I came from a traditional background. We are taught in law school and also in practice the cases, the case law. Okay. For something to have made it into case law, it means that people have spent millions of dollars to litigate something to its end. Either it's on the patent office side of things or it's on the patent infringement litigation. It's still the result of a very long process where more interesting stories perhaps have fallen out. You don't hear those interesting stories. Stuff that got to the end, there was a lot of money at stake, and there were people who really cared. Those become the stories we all hear. Those becomes the things that we're all trained on, right? Don't do this because this bad thing can happen, which was a result of 4 years and $25 million of litigation. So they're by definition parade of horribles. But you wouldn't manage your life on horror stories, right? You would never leave your house, right? If you do this, something bad might happen to you because it happened once in a million times. We don't run our lives like that, but somehow we run our patent lives like that.
Yeah,
But if
those
you
are more
also,
so the guardrails, right? I think those should be the
yeah,
guardrails, but those really are the exceptions.
yeah, those are they're absolutely the exceptions, but they are the rule when it comes to how we traditional patent people are trained, right? And what is lost are those things that don't go to litigation that had good results. Because if they had good results, you don't hear about them, right? You can only hear about them if somebody who's been doing this as long as I have can tell you, yeah, these things can happen if we do this or whatever. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox, but you have to use them all, right? But the other problem with the system is that we lawyers somehow think we can't tell stories, right? It would betray client confidences. I told a bunch of stories here today about my clients, and I betrayed not a single client confidence, right?
Right.
Because I'm comfortable in my expertise and my knowledge, and I can I can tell stories that can educate but still allow me to retain those client confidences. Effectively, they can be case studies, right? And lawyers just don't do that. And it's either because we don't think we can, we don't want to, because secrecy, right? Secrecy is good for the legal profession, right?
Right.
Because if nobody knows what we do, they'll have to pay us to do something for them, right?
Yeah, and I think you and I definitely think opposite of that. The more that we share, the more that we educate, the better we can do what we do, and the better we
Yeah.
can provide value.
People know who I am and what I do, and they come to me because they know what I do. They're going to be good clients for me. People who don't understand what I do are going to be bad clients for me.
100%. So I will take you up on an offer to promise to do this again. I want to say thank you so much for sharing these stories and insights with us. Now, for anyone that wants to dive deeper into IP strategy with you, where's the best place to find you?
So I'm available on LinkedIn. Anybody wants to contact me there. I have a podcast and I have a couple of videos for startup and early stage founders. Those are hard to find, but if you follow me now or in the future, I'm about to embark on a very interesting AI enabled marketing program where all the content I've been blogging for almost 20 years too, not so frequently recently. But all that stuff, all the good stuff, what I consider to be the good stuff, is going to be refreshed in an AI-enabled marketing perspective on social media in the very near future. So if you probably the best way would be to follow me on LinkedIn and wait for those announcements because there's going to be lots of fresh, hopefully exciting, as it were, as exciting as patent can be in the future content from me. And it's going to spur a lot of more questions and hopefully, and with my intention being to educate a lot more folks to be better at hiring their own people. I can't do everybody's work, right? And I don't want to do everybody's work, but the more educated that a patent consumer is on their side of things, the better they can be at hiring people and managing their own patent lives.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I look forward to seeing that and
Yeah.
excited to see how that works, opening so many things. I want to
Mhm.
thank you for being a guest on Patent Insider Secrets, a podcast where we bring in the top minds in intellectual property and share the insider knowledge that every founder and creative professional needs to know to make their ideas truly work for them. Thank you for being a part of this program and really making it special today in this conversation. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful day And audience, join us next time on our next episode of Patent Insider Secrets.
Thank you, Tariq. Appreciate it.